Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. I have the amazing pleasure of interviewing an author whose work I have been absorbed in for the last couple of days. Her name is Grace Sammon. She has written a book called The Eves, and if you have not checked it out yet, oh my gosh, do yourself a favor, pick a copy up. I am going to get her on, and we are going to start discussing this amazing book. Now, this is always the fun part. Hello!
Hello, hello. Good afternoon. Look at us all live and everything.
And I can hear you, I can see you. We're winning already.
I tell you, this is fabulous.
Cheers! It's Gatorade.
Thanks for having me, Marie.
Oh, thank you so much for joining. I gave a little bit of an introduction to your book, and the first thing I want to say is happy Bookstaversary. You've been out for a year.
I have, and what a year it's been. I've been an author before. I've written 3 other books, but this whole world in this pandemic, in this social media time is crazy. It's just really changed so many expectations I had. So thanks for the happy birthday anniversary.
I love that, because that was actually going to be my next follow-up, was what all happened and transpired in that year. Obviously, when you write a book, there is this huge, huge iceberg, and then we're all just seeing the tip. So for you, what all went on behind the scenes? How many years of work is this?
Oh, from the time that I had the first idea to the publication might have even been 9 years, but the writing itself was probably about a 2-year process.
Okay.
And I'm going to interrupt you because I actually can't see you.
You can't.
Can you see both of us?
I can. I have me on top and you on the bottom.
I have a circle like this on the top, but I'll just imagine you there.
We're going to go with it.
We are.
I see you on there. If you can tell me, can you see both of us? I would love that. If you could just give me a quick comment. But otherwise, yeah, let's just keep going because the audio is important anyway. So you decided to self-publish. And in here, you had a couple books in 2007, 2008 that looked like they were perhaps geared towards an audience in the educational community.
The first 3 books actually were focused entirely on high school improvement. That's what I did for my full-time job. And I traveled 200 days a year to 32 states. And those books were picked up by Corwin Press.
Okay.
And that was an interesting experience in and of itself because I had never published a book before. I'd written multiple articles in the area of education, but I had never published a book. I sent it out to, I think it was 14 publishers, and I got 11 yeses back within weeks.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So great experience. The world of novels, as you know, is not at all like that. You usually need an agent. You need to have a million query letters. You need to sell your book sometimes in as little as 3 sentences.
Yeah.
So I tried to do that, and I did a very bad job of it. And for those people who are listening who don't know, you don't even necessarily hear back. And the agents are very, very clear about that. You'll only hear back from us if we're in love with you. And so we didn't hear back. So I decided to really look into the world of indie publishing, but really wrestled with it as well. So I went the indie publishing route by making sure I was with a very good house that was going to give me a lot of back of the house support. So I went with a wonderful company called Writing Nights and Chad Robertson. And he just did such a fabulous job. But then I also found out that as an indie publisher, it's very hard to get your book into bookstores.
It is. Yeah.
And that's just, it might actually be a little bit of an ego thing. It's beautiful. When I walk into a library and I see my book on the shelf, I want to see my book in a bookstore. So one of the things that we did, though, was we re-released with a firm called Upstream Press. And now it's available to bookstores everywhere and on Apple Books. So it's kind of a hybrid model now.
I love it. I think that is the future of publishing, to be honest. And we all we bring our own success. We make it is what we make of it. And this is how we do it. You just keep going and getting out there. Now, how many bookstores have you gotten into? Are you pretty much like, if you have you walked into any stores and seen your book?
I haven't walked into any bookstores. I've walked into numbers of libraries, which is always nice. But yeah, I think the majority of sales now just do happen online. I'm in Barnes and Noble, but to be in a bookstore, I haven't seen that yet. Doesn't mean I'm not there. But anybody can actually just ask their bookstore to carry it.
Okay.
And that's how that can happen.
You need to be on an airport kiosk. I that is the one that I always look at when I'm going through the airport and I see the book. I'm like, oh, there, that's the goal. And you will be there. I really, really think that is. I've gone through this. It's just, I mean, you've read all my posts today. You have those books for me that I revisit every year, or every few years, and they just remind me of the wisdom that I have to keep resetting my brain to. And this is now going into that, and is possibly what I feel like so many of those other books is one dimensional, and what you have created here is a kaleidoscope. I like.
Oh,
You
thank
just
you.
you are welcome. That when I look at everything that's happening here, and I think of how much had to come out of your brain to get it all, 2 years of writing actually seems very short.
Well, a lot of research, and that probably comes out of my educational background. But before we go into that, I wanted to mention your comment about the airport kiosks. I'm going to be traveling in a couple of weeks, and I was thinking of bringing books and just leaving them on the shelves and taking pictures.
Do it, do it. The last time I was at an airport, I just put one of mine on the shelf and took a photo, and I thought I should have left it there. like in the little library, put a
Yeah,
note book, and
yeah. I
yeah,
think that's what I'm going to leave it on a couple of different airport shelves, and then I'll put like my email and web address inside of it. I think that would be fun.
yes. I want to hear how this works. I definitely this would be very good for you.
Well, thank you. And the research was a joy. There was so much in the book that I wanted to share. I'm an educator at heart, and I wanted to tell a story that was both very emotionally driven. So there's lots of plot twists in the book, but I also wanted to learn along the way.
Mhm.
So the main character has this little nerdy thing about DNA, and I use that as a vehicle for how we're all connected. If
Yes.
we take the time, there's only 9 strands of mitochondrial DNA in all of humanity. So I really wanted to capture that.
Yeah.
So thank you. I loved your posts today. They were really wonderful. They made me cry.
Oh, good. Okay, so we both made each other.
Yeah, we both cried.
I'm like, I gotta put the makeup on. I kept telling myself, I'm like, I am not crying in this interview. It's not gonna
Oh,
happen.
I could try to make you though.
You, if I don't cry by the end of the interview, I probably will be surprised.
Oh,
Um, so one of my things is like we all write because there's so much inside that we don't say, and like all of the stuff that you talk about in here with the lessons that we're trying to pass on to people we love and people that we're trying to just like guide, and they don't listen. That's just the hallmark of parenting and of dealing with our significant others. They're the people least likely to embrace our wisdom. Did people that read this book get surprised by the fact that all of this was in you, or was everyone like, oh yeah, we knew this was coming?
oh, it's really, excuse me. It's funny because some people just assume I'm the main character because it's told in Jessica's voice. It's the entire novel is pretty much told in first person, which some people really love because they get inside the character's head, and some people find it a very uncomfortable place to be.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's okay.
Yeah.
So there'd be times where, and there's this very dramatic scene in the opening of the novel, excuse me, where Jessica tells the story about what happened to her children. And I remember going up to my community pool, and one of my beta readers were going, oh, I didn't know that happened to your kids. Well,
Oh,
didn't happen to my children, thank God. But I think that people were surprised because people have a very funny idea of novelists, or maybe authors in general, really, Marie, right? You know, they think that we live this amazing life, that these thoughts come just out from under us. We sit there, we type it up, and then, you know, we go for manicures and pedicures. You know, they don't know that we change the kitty litter or whatever else we do. So I think in some respects they were surprised at the whole process of a novel. And then they always want to say, oh, is this person that? Is this person that?
Yeah, they immediately think when you write in first person, you know, and then they start pointing out, oh, this must be this character for here, and yeah, it's tough to separate. So, well, I am so grateful that you like powered through and got this work out. Have you had a lot of responses now from just complete strangers that have surprised you?
Absolutely. You know, you never know why certain books resonate. And I'm very grateful. I think I'm above 4 stars on all of the platforms now, which is really wonderful and humbling. So to go to BookBub or Goodreads or to Amazon, to any of the other platforms, to see the book trending so well there, that's really wonderful. And I love reading the reviews. I don't think that readers know how important those reviews are to authors, both in terms of, you know, the tricky things of algorithms to get the book recommended, but just the emotional support, if you will. The thing about the Eves that I've really found amazing is that it met its goal, which was to create conversations between people. I mentioned a little while ago Chad Robertson from Writing Nights. And when he and I first sat down to see whether he would take my book, his question to me over and over again was, Grace, why are you writing this book? And I was like, well, because it's supposed to be a Netflix series. And then he would say, well, no, Grace, why are you writing this book? And he pushed back on me. And the final answer was, because I want this book to help people have conversations. I want this book to have people understand their younger self and their older self. There was a movie, not a movie, a song that was John Prine's that I talk about frequently in interviews. And the name of the song is Hello in There, Hello. And I heard Bette Midler sing it decades ago.
Okay.
And it's this wonderful song that says, you know, don't pass old people by as if they don't matter. Say hello in there, hello. And that's what I've gotten back in the reviews more than anything else. You know, I don't talk to my brother. I haven't talked to my mother. I'm estranged from. And that this book has had a way of touching people's hearts in ways of either helping soothe that pain that so many people go through, but also intrigued them in ways of, how do I want to live as I age? Because that's really something I wanted to play with in the book as well. How do I want to age? I wrote it at a time where I was winding down the educational consulting firm. I wasn't yet married to my husband. So there was a big question about, what does getting old look like? And the older women in the Eves, I think, just really rock it. And I would love to come sit with the Eves as I age. And that's one of my favorite reviews I get. Can I come live at the Eves with the women?
Yeah, we want to know these people. And as soon as it's done, that's a lot of the reviews I read. People say too, is like, I miss these characters already. Like, I want to go hang out with them. What you created does seem like this sort of nirvana that all want to get to. It makes aging not so scary. Because we, especially after quarantine, isolation, and it's community that heals and gives purpose and renewed life, and people continue to live longer and longer if they have community. So, and
I, they not only live longer and longer, I think these women really challenge themselves. And, you know, they do amazing things throughout their lives, and they have some pretty amazing things that happen to them and by their hand in the last couple of chapters of the book. But they're not without their foibles either. You
right,
know, there's one woman who's beginning to move into dementia. I sometimes feel I should have had somebody have, you know, a hip replacement or some of the things that were more challenging, but they're challenged enough by some of the drama that happens.
yeah, absolutely. I think you captured diversity and the word that is on the back here, multi-generational. You really do. You get the diversity and you get people from all walks of life coming together and, clashing it out, but never doing, the horrible thing that, most of the characters struggle with is that estrangement. You show how people can let their guard down, absorb it, and then move on. The fights happen, and then when the fights are done, you just, like when Erica and Sonia are fighting, and it's like, okay, I grounded her, but then they're fine, and it's the little things, but they blow out of proportion in real life.
They really do. And I love that there's a theme in the book as well about just not taking the time to understand each other or not taking the time to really understand ourselves. So there's a scene in the book that I love where two of the characters are talking about the events that they should have on the sustainable farm. So they have a Mother's Day and they have a harvest and they have these various events. But one of the African American women wants to have a Juneteenth event.
I was going to call you out on that because I was like, I didn't know what Juneteenth was either.
Well, and I would tell you that this is a wonderful thing that happened because the other characters, of course, don't know either. The other Caucasian characters don't know. And that was written at a time that I would say very fairly, most Caucasian people would not have known what Juneteenth is. The book came out last year on June 15th, just before George Floyd was murdered.
Oh,
And then I would say there's not another person who would not know now what Juneteenth is, and now we have it as a federal holiday. So here, just a year later, there's a part of my book that is, to me, delightfully obsolete.
oh, okay, now that is really funny because I was thinking, yeah, I didn't put the timeline together. I was like, oh yeah, she was going with the Juneteenth theme because now it's just everywhere.
No, that scene was probably written 2.5, 3 years ago, even.
Oh wow. Well,
So yeah, that's an old scene.
oh,
And so for this now, just, a year after the pub date, I love that it's obsolete.
it still sets like a framework for people to say, okay, well now we know this is a holiday. How do we celebrate it? And I was like,
Yes.
people
Yes.
can reference your book and be like, well, this is how we celebrate Juneteenth.
A lot of red food.
Ah, I like it. You had so much with food and cooking and so many like culturally diverse people and then the menus and I I want to know, is your life enriched with that many varied people also, or did you research a lot of this?
No, I would say that I'm very, very lucky. My life is certainly not as diverse, even as I would like it to be. But as an author, when I chose to write, as a Caucasian author, when I chose to write with such a diverse group, right? So we have Black people, we have white people, we have Latinx family, we have a gay couple, we have people who are part Native American. It was really important for me to try to get those voices as authentic as possible. So my beta group had to be very diverse.
Yeah.
So I would send out the pages to say, first of all, is there anything glaringly wrong? Like, it wasn't Juneteenth, it was June 5th, or
Yeah.
things like that. But I also really wanted to make sure that I had as much feedback as I could, even though there's no monolithic group, right? So if I give it to a man to read, he can't speak for all men. If I give it to my Black girlfriends, I can't say, so do you think all Black people will like this book?
Yeah.
But I at least get the feedback that I'm either off base or okay in, within that. And then it's got to resonate with the individual readers appropriately.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you did such a good job. And I mean, granted, I am very much one narrow opinion, but I don't, as much as I wish I had like this diverse group of people around me, I still feel like I just don't have that enrichment. So reading this story, you do that great thing of showing the motivation behind what makes a person who they are, such that the empathy is there. And readers that also have a narrower scope of personalities can perhaps have barriers broken down just by reading this. I feel like that is what you've got going on here.
Well, I'm sometimes asked how important is race? and gender identification in the book. And I always want to say it's critically important and not important at all. And what I mean by that is I want to bring those voices to the room, to the book, to the reader, but I don't want those to be so overpowering that that's what you take away.
Yeah, yeah. I think you've done that. And that is,
Thank
it
you.
makes perfect sense because so many times it's just like, it's shoved in a reader's face, and but we all know it and we live it and we exist day to day, and one of the end games actually would just be to like, we are all in this together, we are all raising and supporting each other, and no one person is like, you know, yeah, yeah, I love that you've got that going on here. uh One of the things I was wondering about, as far as I'm sitting here going on this, like, this is such a huge inspirational book, and I gave it the comparison to like Tuesdays with Maury, and even just the oh, now I'm drawing a blank on whatever the name is, but those kinds of books that when you're at a pivotal moment in your life and you really are about to break down, you need something to open your mind and break open your heart. This is, this is going in that category. What for you? Do you have a book that's like, this is my book that I go to for that?
No, I don't. And that's such a great question. I think certain books have touched me differently at different times, for sure, depending on what I'm going through. I loved reading, for example, Woman in the Window, because
Okay.
I was reading that as I was writing this. And that's also told in the first person. So I loved, like, she was trapped in the house, and Jessica is so trapped in her own life. So I was devouring that book because I was thinking, oh, I could I could be that person, and that person could talk in my head that way. But no, I certainly have books that have made a big difference. I talk a lot about Black Beauty, the first book I ever fell in love with, the first book that ever made me cry. But no, I don't have a go-to book like that.
Okay. Okay. Well, this is, you wrote one of them. That's why I was like, what is it that she has in her mind as this? Because then you like surpassed what I could have ever imagined. Um,
You're very kind.
oh, thank you. As far as like this book now and where you stand, do you have a shoot for the moon goal of where you could go? I mean, you already said, and I love hearing this, that you already met your goal of like starting the conversation. But if, I believe this is going to happen for you one day. You're going to be initiated by all of those women like Elizabeth Gilbert and Cheryl Stray. They're all going to come, like, kidnap you, put a bag over your head, and you're going to wake up singing karaoke like I'm Just a Girl. And you're going to have that role as one of these iconic women in our lives. So if that torch is passed on to you, what are you going to do?
I'm just going to ask you to organize it.
I will. I will be.
I, you know, I, I will say I get a lot. This needs to become a movie. This needs to become a Netflix series. But I think I love that I get that, because I think many authors feel that, oh my gosh, and as I was writing the book, I could see different characters playing different roles. But um, I was talking to a wonderful author the other day, Michelle Cox, and we were both have this idea that our books can make it to the big screen or to the little screen. And we were saying, where are the Netflix fairies? How do you find them?
Right.
So I would love to see that happen for this book in just lots of ways. I because of the conversations. Yes, there would be the ego involved, and truly, there's probably no way that an author actually makes money unless they. So, are you still with me?
I am. You cut out for a second, and I got you right back.
Oh, good, thanks. Um, so I think that I was talking to Michelle Cox, as I said, and we don't know where the Netflix series fairies are. And then there's Leslie Lair, who's just written this wonderful book called A Boob's Life.
Ooh.
And it's the story of America and her own obsession with breasts. And it's already been picked up by, I think it came out in March. Don't hold me to that, but I think it was March. And it's been picked up by Selma Hayek, for an HBO series,
Oh, wow.
which
Wow.
is really amazing. But when I was speaking with her the other day, she was saying it'll probably be years before it hits the screen. So just like there's all those years of what happens when you go to publish, I can't imagine what it's like when you have to then turn it onto a series.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of a pipe dream now that just keeps getting further and further up. I'm in San Diego, which, you get a lot of the LA, like just lingo
Sure.
and stuff going on here. And I have a girlfriend whose husband or her boyfriend's in filmmaking, and she wants to write screenplays. And it's just, even she's just like, I don't know. It's,
Well, it's really hard, and it's interesting because sometimes people will ask me, is there a sequel to the book? And I haven't seen that, although I can see myself writing the episodes. So I need to think more about that as turning that into a sequel. Mary Sheriff, who's another wonderful author, and she's writing her second novel now, and she wrote the whole first part as if it was a screenplay, and now she's backfilling to see if she can turn it into a novel. So I'll be interested in watching her process doing that.
that is interesting to know if you like the one screenplay that just like went straight to screenplay from nobody. I always think of as Juno, and she
Hmm.
wrote that and got it sold, but those seem so small. And then we always think of The Martian because
Yes,
his road to success was extraordinary.
it
Um,
was.
wonder how many how many more times is that going to transpire?
No, if you Google people who indie published and became bestsellers, I think there's like 8 of them. So it's not a long list.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I keep having things like pop into my mind and then they just run away. So I do want to put this out there. Anyone who has joined us and is hanging out and has a question that they want to ask, go ahead and just type it in. You can type it into the questions and it pops up at this little thing at the bottom I can pull up, or you can just write it in there and we can always, get to anything that you might want to know. As far as we're at right now, what are some other things that you really wanted to get across to readers or to, just audiences that might not be in here?
You mean in other works or within the book itself?
Just within, yeah, the scope of this and the book. Yeah.
Well, I love the idea that Jessica doesn't see herself clearly. She's horribly lost. She's given up on everything other than her vodka and her sense of loss and guilt.
Oh no.
There we are. Are we live again?
Yeah. Yes. You just,
And I can see you now.
oh, yay. Okay.
And you can hear me?
I can.
Perfect. I have a request to join, but I'm just going to ignore that. So now I can see you. So thank you. So much nicer being able to see you.
It,
So Jessica has, she's fallen away from her career. She's fallen away from her sense of self. She hasn't fallen away from her vodka or her sense of guilt. And she just doesn't see herself clearly. And luckily, she has a very bossy friend, as you know, Sonia, who tells her she has to stop hiding. She says, I know you did not leave your mark on the land today, and you will stop that today, and you will write about these women. And when she does that, when their stories are told, the older women's stories change, and so does Jessica's. But a lot of times within the book, Jessica will tell people, oh, so and so is immediately likable. And she just doesn't see that she herself is immediately likable. She's so out of touch with her character and her gifts. And everybody just loves Jessica. They tell her their heart stories. They're eager to share with her. They want her to come down and hang out at the Grange. So I love that. I think she gets to know that a little bit better towards the end of the book.
yes. I love what you've done with her as a character. I was reading some of your answers in the back, and you had said, one of the people that you didn't really like a whole lot was Jessica. And I actually love her. I think once as the whole human experience, she sounds like she was a big, strong fighter and she lost a fight. And you know what? Sometimes we lose a fight. And then, it's not the worst thing to go underground, but she obviously didn't lose herself because she still has Sonia, who we all want a Sonia. Like if I could have a Sonia in my life, yeah,
Yes.
nice to have that. And she didn't completely lose herself. She definitely went to the depths of despair, and she learned a lot during it. And I feel like there's so many people in this world that are in that role, and they might not see themselves as amazing, and you still are like that. Yeah, I think she's good.
And I'm glad that you like her. My next door neighbor was one of my beta readers, and he just says, she's a liar. I can't like her. And
Oh,
Jessica tells a couple of pretty profound lies in the book, but they're lies in my estimation that it's the only way she can get through her life.
yeah.
At, she's not a pathological liar. She has created a construct that you can't talk to me about these things because it's too painful. So let me create this world that isn't true. So that was very upsetting to me. And in my book trailer, the first words we actually landed on were, Jessica Barnett is a liar. And I was like, oh, I don't like that, but it makes for an engaging read.
It does, but oh yeah. No, I feel like there should almost be more words to describe a lie that is a pathological lie or a deceitful lie or one that truly does harm and one that is not harming other people and allows you to function.
Yeah.
Because we are very, very complex human beings, and there's so much going on behind the surface that everyone around us is not seeing. And we all have to cope. Everyone's got coping strategies. And when you feel like you're alone in your coping strategies, you like wall yourself off more. And when you see a character who is actually so lovable and perhaps, if flawed, as we all are, coping poorly, but then also moving through it. And I love that you show initially how she's coping and then how she even plays with, I have to be honest with myself and then I have to be honest with other people. And taking people through that process it's like giving them free therapy. They need it.
And she's really confused, right? There's that scene up on the roof where she's kind of playing two truths and a lie.
Yeah, yeah.
And the chapter is called that. And it's hard for her to realize when she constructed this lie about her life, she never thought it was going to come back and haunt her. She just thought she was going to move through life and people would believe it, and then all of a sudden she has to confront the lie and let go, and then some really good things happen.
Yeah, right, exactly. And the lies are born from like those kinds of pain that could, you feel like could be life ending. Being a mom and thinking about losing your children by their own choice, there is no greater blow. And then
Right.
to absorb that and turn it around, and then to explain that to people every day versus just giving yourself, like, some
Yeah.
means of coping. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I think it's,
Well, I certainly forgave her. So,
yeah, yeah. And like when you think about how, her husband and the strategy or just, what he does, he still has the kids. And even though he's the bad one and all of the suffering that she went through, I mean, and I'm sure men suffer too, but I feel like there are so often times where women, there's so much pain and there's so much suffering and being a mom and all of the things that we end up just sort of carrying inside us as we go throughout our lives. And seeing these older women, they do have so much, so they're so rich. And yeah, I loved it.
great. What did you think of some of the places that we went? We start out in Washington, D.C., and we do the Chesapeake Bay, bounce over to Africa, little trip to Norway.
I had to ask about the Africa thing. And I love how you make references to certain movies that I just remember, and Out of Africa being the one, like my mom loved that movie. And I remember as a kid,
Yes,
like we would just watch it with such a romantic notion. And
yes,
Africa, amazing place. Okay, so I'm in Africa, but DC, I have to give you kudos in that one. But first, I want to talk about Africa. Have you been? Do you?
yes.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Because
I have been to, there are, there are some parts of the book that are absolutely autobiographical. So I went to Tanzania. Just like Jessica, I lost my luggage.
oh,
I did 12 days on safari with like two pairs of underwear and a t-shirt. So that is very autobiographical. Although in my case, Jessica gets her luggage back way sooner than I did. I think mine was 3.5 months before I got my luggage back.
oh God.
So, but that was a very, very moving trip for me. I went to Africa at Christmas time by myself, just like Jessica did. And I realized that, I was very, very far away and nobody knew exactly where I was. And to try to find internet on the middle of safari was not easy thing to do, but it was such an amazing place. So the character of Robert, who I love, he's so wise. He's totally made up.
Oh,
There was no Robert. But so all that Bwana Bibi dialogue, that was all just made up.
okay.
But yeah, I did go to Tanzania, and it's absolutely beautiful. And there were so many lessons to be learned there. I thought I had seen poverty in places like the Caribbean, but to go to Africa, it's a totally different experience. And it is very humbling to stand on the Ngora Ngora crater, and you just feel like it is the hand of God moved over the earth, whether you're a religious person or not. That's, a line from the Christian Bible, and in the very beginning, and there's this line about, and the hand of God moved over the earth. And I could not stand there without feeling that profoundly.
Yeah, you crushed that whole scene. Like you feel like you're there, and I even like, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, if we want to like look at to a spot where it seems like everything sort of emanated forth from, that's the feeling I got was like creation moment of it. Just it felt very holy and spiritual, and I loved it.
Well, thank you. And I love that you liked it, because there were a couple of things. People either love the two chapters that take place in Africa, or they were like, why did you do that? Why
Yeah.
did she go to Africa? And for me, it's really where she learns to stand on her own 2 feet. She's got the women who are supporting her now. She's got the little relationship with Roy, which may or may not go anywhere. But that's the place where she learns to stand. And so for me, they were really important chapters. Plus, as a novelist, I wanted to write about them.
I think it was great. And you did say something at the end too. Like I did that one thing in the first book that everyone says you shouldn't do, which is put everything I know into one,
Yes.
which I mean, it's so dense. There's so much in there. And that was actually one of the things that I was thinking about as I was reading this was if she went through a traditional publisher, they would cut this. They would. They just have that, like, it has to be tight and it has to be very, very. And I was so happy that you put it out on your own and put that in there because this also the thing that you miss in movies. It's that little backstory or those tiny moments that explain everything, where everything opens up that yeah, I thought it was a wonderful addition. But I
Thank you.
love the way you describe DC. I have my own like romance with DC. So you lived there for
Oh,
a time.
forever. I moved there to go to college, and then I stayed there until I was 55, maybe. So many, many years. And the house that Jessica lives in is actually modeled on the house that my daughter lived in college.
Oh, okay.
So, and we would talk about renovating the house. And so I just renovated it in the book. I knew I wanted the book to take place in DC. I loved Calvert Cliffs, Maryland. So I put Jessica on the street where my daughter lived. I renovated the house in some ways that she and I had spoken of. And one of the things I love in the book, and readers always say, oh, well, that can't possibly be true. But Jessica, as you know, she climbs up onto her rooftop of her front porch. And at a certain time of night, if the wind is blowing from the west, she can hear lions roar from the zoo. And you can.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's very, very cool. Doesn't happen often, but the city has to be a certain amount of quiet because that's a pretty quiet street anyway, and you're not that far from the zoo. But when that magical moment happens and you can hear the lions roaring, everybody says, "Oh, you just made that up." True.
I love it. The National Zoo is a magical place. And I think unless you have an understanding of how that just sort of falls in the middle
Yes.
of the city and you just sort of arrive there. And yeah, there's something about historic DC that it's a charm, and it's a place unlike anything that you experience anywhere else in the US. And you did capture the charm of it.
Thank you.
Now, yeah, so when we talk about the Grange, and you also do a great job of just describing the fields and the land and all of the history behind it, with it being, passed on. And I love that the fact that it was like the slave owner that had the kid who took it on, but he was all of those things, but that they still had the land and he was there was phenomenal. The way that you did all of the green stuff for the eaves, are you like a green person, or do you have all of
Oh, I wish I was greener than I am. I think I was a great role model for my kids because they both started recycling at their school when they were in grade school, and they're both 40 now. So, back in the day in grade school, they were starting recycling programs. But my son went and lived on a sustainable farm for 6 months in Maine.
Oh,
And
cool.
I was so enamored by the thought of doing that. I would have never done it, by the way, but I was loved that he went and lived totally off the grid, which the Grange is not at all off the grid. They've got every conceivable appliance, they've got sub-zero fridges, but it's still a sustainable farm. The new house is run on car batteries. So I had the experience of my son and his harvesting at the Grange, and I went to help do the harvest. So you see that scene captured twice in the book about the beans and how that is done. And then I was very lucky that my daughter went and lived in Taos, New Mexico, and her house was run on car batteries.
Okay.
So that gave me the idea. But the best part for me in terms of this was, when I realized where the characters were going to go with this, I didn't know what to do in terms of all of the sustainable features. So I have a girlfriend of mine, Marianne, who's very, very green. And I would just call her up and say, okay, I need countertops. And she said, okay, you're going to make them out of paper, or whatever the product is.
I had no idea that was a thing.
Yeah, so she was great. I said, okay, now I need kitchen cabinets. Are they wood? She goes, no, 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 they're bamboo. So it was great to have her as a resource.
I love how the toilet becomes like a conversation point, the lovable loo.
Yes, and they actually work great. We should all have lovable loos that turn into gray water systems. So,
Oh, yes. I loved the chapter heading. What was it? Or something about the living gray and green.
oh yeah, it was an article. Yes,
That's what it
one of
was.
the ladies writes an article.
Yeah.
Living gray and green.
I mean, all of the things that are in here, I can't even begin to describe. I probably need to read it a few more times before
Well,
I
thank you.
thought it all. And then you had so many characters too. Did you have like a board where you were drawing people out and storyboarding characters? How did you?
I did in the beginning, and there were 8 women in the beginning, and I couldn't keep them straight. So once I couldn't keep them straight, I knew that a reader couldn't keep them straight. And so there are still times people say, I wish you had done one of those things in the back of the book that said, you
Oh,
know,
mhm.
this character is this character, this relationship to that relationship. And that may have helped or not. But I didn't do that. So I storyboarded out in the very beginning with all the characters. But once I got into a rhythm, no, I didn't. I was lucky enough to have them talk in my head. So they would have conversations and I would wake up laughing because they would just make me giggle.
That's the best part about being a writer, when you're having all that stuff going on and then you're just like in public and you're just, and also you're like, I text myself this.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
It's always fun to talk to another author because they get that whole voices in your head.
Yep. Did you go through, one of my quotes was like, favorite quotes was, publishing a book is like taking a child out in the backyard and shooting it. Have it, and for me, the first go around when I finished and published it, I was like, I feel like I have experienced the greatest loss in my life. It was so horrifically painful, and I didn't realize that, writing is hard. Did you have any of that?
Oh, I really missed them. And they kept talking to me for a little while. And as people say to me, please write a sequel, I keep on saying, okay, come back, ladies. What are we going to be talking about now?
Yeah.
And, I've got a couple of other books that I'm kind of dancing around. I wish I was further along in absolutely any one of them. So I've actually been thinking about, should I go back and play with a sequel to this? But I'd like to challenge myself to go in a new direction at the same time. It is really sad. And it's interesting. There's been a wonderful 2 weeks worth of celebrations for the book birthday. And, you're the crowning jewel in that tonight. So thank you.
I love that I get to finish it off. Actually,
You do. You get to finish it off. And I love all of the feedback that I've gotten. But there's also a sense of, it's been a whole year. And I don't have another book. I think if I was able to say, I gave this year to this book and we'll continue to talk, because I have interviews. I think I've interviews through October still on this book. And then I actually did an interview that doesn't air until next March on the book.
Oh.
But I was really thinking that I really would be much more celebratory if I had that next novel that was coming out.
Yeah, yeah. I totally get that, because then you're just like, yep, and this is the next thing. That's probably too, though, where having the traditional publisher versus being indie published comes into play as well, because I think for you, you're going to have 1 year of just picking up steam and then exponential year two. And so I think this is going to be riding a wave that just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I can't see anyone who picks this book up is going to go to 5 people they know and go, oh my God, this book, I'm going to read it to you. I am literally like my husband last night. I'm just going to start while we're in bed, and you need to hear this. Which then begs the question, audiobook. Do you have an audiobook?
I don't have an audiobook, and it's something we've been playing around with.
Okay.
I think there will be an audiobook. Ideally, my goal was, if I was going to do one, I would release right before Christmas of this coming year, right before the holidays. That there's an outside chance that will happen, but I just don't know. It's interesting. I did the voiceover for the trailer, and that was really well received. And that actually started some voiceover work for me, which is kind of funny that, you don't think you're going to be, yeah, it's really funny that the side effects of writing a book are intriguing to me. So there's been a lot of interest in me actually reading the book. And I tried to do that. It is really hard. These voiceover artists are amazing. The first page of the book is something like, Jessica and Sonia are in the car, and they've had a full day, and they're covered with manure from being down at the farm, and there's the warm glow of Erica's digital camera coming from the back seat as she flips through all the images she's taken. I can't tell you how many times I said digital, digitus, digiti. I could not get the word digital out of my mouth.
Yeah.
I think it took us about 2.5 hours to read the first chapter. So we'll see.
Yeah. Oh, and then you start thinking about, what the value of your time is per hour. And yeah, that just starts to go, you can pay someone to do this. With all of the characters too, you have such diversity with young, old, generational, different just backgrounds and accents. You want somebody that's going to go into each one of those a little bit, I think that would help. And oh, I was trying to get all that.
It would be very hard, I think, to do that. You know, ideally you would have multiple characters doing it, but that's just not the way the world of audiobooks would play out.
Yep, yep, for sure. I love that you're doing voiceover work though, and that other things have a branched off on this. I did ask you just like personally, what
Sure.
you career, because once again, I feel like this is the combination of somebody who has done many, many, many things. It just shows in here how cultured and just like educated you are and what experiences you've been through. And because it's like you've lived multiple lives, and so where are you at now? Are you retired and focused 100% on this, or what's the like day to day?
Well, it's funny because one of the key messages in the book, and we've talked about several, is that we are never done, right? Jessica goes into the book. You meet Jessica, she's done. She's done her career, she's done being a mom, she is just done. And I really thought that once I wrote the book, I was done. And apparently I'm not done. And that's a delightful surprise. And some days when I get very overwhelmed by that I'm not as sharp on social media as I might want to be, or any of the other things that are sometimes overwhelming. I was telling a friend of mine the other day that when I was younger, I was a type A, but now that I'm 68, I'm like a B minus.
Yes.
You know, I definitely don't have that same drive as I used to. I still work a lot. Um, right now, I'm a moderator on one Facebook group, which is a wonderful group over at Annie McDonald's World of the Right Review. And I'm an administrator on another wonderful Facebook group called The Bookish Road Trip.
Oh,
So
cool.
I spend a lot of time in those two Facebook platforms. And I'm starting a brand new project that I'll be announcing in July, but we could do a sneak preview here.
Yes, let's.
Yes. So one of the things is I gave an interview to this woman who's well into her 80s. Her name is Dr. Gail Carson. Everybody should look her up. She's all over the internet. She owns multiple radio stations. One of her radio stations is SOB Radio, and it's Spunky Old Broad Radio. So she loved our interview, and she's offered me my own radio show.
No way.
Way, way.
Congratulations. That is mind blowing.
It is mind blowing. We start recording in July. The
Okay.
episodes will start. So it's hybrid. They call it hybrid eye, all the things I didn't know a year ago. I'm going to write like a blog post about all of the things I knew nothing about a year ago. Like I didn't know what a TBR was, did not know what a TBR was. So I should just like write a post of all the things I didn't know about. So anyway, hybrid eye radio is you tape it, but then it airs on a specific date.
Okay.
And then after that, it goes into podcast world.
Okay.
So yeah, that was kind of a big surprise.
That is so amazing. And you are like a luminary and someone I am so inspired by, because you are never done, and careers should constantly be evolving. I'm a dentist by work and trade, and it is a very strange career because you work, 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 and everything about what I do and what I produce depends on me being physically manual labor in someone's mouth. And then when that's done, I have no means of making money anymore.
Right.
I am looking at myself already going, okay, I'm 40 and I hate to say I'm tired, but it is manual labor and we get tired, and you want your career to keep evolving and keep growing. And my stepdad was a dentist. He retired and I love him. I mean, he succumbed to Alzheimer's within 3 years. And you see that with people when they really do think that they're done, or there's this almost it's so hard to see people quit one career and not keep evolving.
And it doesn't have to, first of all, thanks for being a dentist. And I wish I lived closer. I love my dentist, but it's not my favorite place to be. But I I don't think it necessarily has to be work. This has turned into work for me, but I think volunteering is so important. And the women at the eaves, do that so well. But for me, it's always really important to also have a volunteer life.
Yeah,
So just to have something that gives your life meaning. And I think that's hard to find as you age.
it is. It is. We just kind of, and social media, there's just, I don't know, the culture is perpetuating it. People keep closing themselves off, and the whole volunteering and getting out, it almost seems hard to do. Like I would love to go and where do you go? You got to get involved in church. You got to find your home and your family outside of family, and so many people lack it.
Well, two places that I really found meaning in. One was with hospice work.
Okay.
So we have a great hospice program here in Florida. So I loved working with people who are on the path to dying and with their families. The other one that I particularly found, and this might be the best work I've done even outside of my educational work, was I worked with what they call guardian ad litem. And in some states they call them guardian ad litems. In other states they call them CASAs, which is a court appointed special advocate. So they're the people who are appointed by the court to watch out for the legal rights of kids in foster care. So working with families that are really torn apart and sometimes do horrible things to children. Those are my two favorite places to volunteer.
That is such good work. It is so needed. Yeah, and I think it shows how strong you are as a person. That my one thing, as soon as you start talking about that, is emotionally, I'm like, oh my God, could I walk into that situation and not cry and not fall apart and not feel all the pain that's going on here and be strong? Those are also, but they're important things that we need to learn how to. You had a character say something along the lines of, the only thing we're promised in this life is death. And yet when it happens, we have no idea how to deal with it.
Yeah.
We get so much education, and I don't feel like that's ever something that there's a class or some honest sit down conversation of, all right, this is how we grieve. It's, it's one of those things that is almost an estranged emotion for people.
And it's amazing how surprised we are, right? Everybody knows that everybody else is going to die, but it's still somehow so shocking when somebody dies. Like, how did that happen? How can that being stop being? And regardless of, what your faith structure is, either you stop being in your entirety, or you stop being and you go somewhere, or you stop being and you transition to somewhere, but that the being, at least as known to us, stops.
Yeah.
And I find it amazing that we are all confounded by that. But the hospice work, actually, I found really, really beautiful and not hard. I did not find that hard. The guardian ad litem work was hard.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, I suppose when it's young people and you're already starting off on the wrong foot, now you have to fix. One of my other favorite quotes is, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken adults.
Yes.
And when you see kids that are already broken, it's heart-wrenching. So
It
I'm
is.
amazed by you once again. We are coming up on the end of the hour.
We are.
I could talk to you for days. I'm so blessed to have come across you. I thank Stephanie for putting us together. Anyone else? Any questions? Did anyone have anything they didn't get? If
Well, anybody can reach out to me on Instagram, on Facebook. My email address is grace@gracesammon.net, and it's spelled Sammon, not like the fish, but it's said like the fish, Grace Sammon. I love doing book clubs. I love chatting with you, with other Instagrammers. I love it when somebody called. I had this one, and she's actually here. She was a little bit ago. She was reading my book, and she would direct message me every morning.
oh
And she
no,
would say, "Oh my God, I can't believe this just happened." And it was at a time where I could answer every day, and I just loved it. So I love interacting. A huge shout out to Stephanie Robble, who put this wonderful book tour together. She's at Book and Wine Lovers. marketing. So she's a huge help to authors. And I also saw that Maggie was on earlier. So Maggie the Reader was with us and a couple of other names. So I'm just delighted that we've had really a great time together today. I'll talk with you anytime.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to make sure that this gets links to this. I'm going to put this on YouTube when we're all said and done as well. So it's going to exist, forever in a couple places. And I thank you so much. I look forward to following your trajectory. It is going to be amazing.
And yours as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Good night. Bye.